We're now joined in the studio by Professor Alaba Ogunsanwo, Nigeria's former High Commissioner to Botswana and Lesotho, and also in charge of South Africa from 1991 to 1994 before the establishment of a High Commission in that country. Professor Ogunsanwo, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You had met Mr. Mandela right after he was released from prison, but before then you served on the diplomatic mission to the country. Tell us your observations of this iconic man.
Before then, I served on the National Committee Against Apartheid. So we did not have a diplomatic mission in South Africa at all until 1994 when the elections were held. So the first time I met him was in 1990 when he was in Nigeria from the 13th to the 16th of May at the invitation of President Ibrahim Babangida at that point in time. And in two capacities. First, the University of Lagos Senate gave him a doctorate degree, honoris causa, and so I was in charge of writing the citation, which was read by Professor Ekweme. I met him then in the office of the Vice Chancellor, and after that, the official reception for him, which I was also part of in terms of the delegation set up, the official committee set up by the federal government to receive him. At the end of that, I traveled with him in the helicopter, Mandela, Winnie, two security officials and myself to Otta Farms to meet General Obasanjo. That was the first intimate interaction with Mandela. Other meetings were in South Africa because when I was High Commissioner of Nigeria to Botswana and Lesotho, I was also taking care of interests in South Africa, and so I met him on a number of occasions, including the time that I arranged for him to meet with Chief M.K. Abiola, who was on tour and had met with State President de Klerk in Cape Town, and I took him to Johannesburg where we met with Mandela in his office with his delegation. And on several other occasions too that we met during the meetings of CODESA and delegations from Nigeria led by Foreign Minister Ike Nwachukwu. So on a number of occasions I had the opportunity, the privilege of meeting the great man. Okay,
you're amongst a number of people who had personal encounters with him, but what are your most memorable moments?
Well, apart from the first one, the thing that would come to mind straight away is when you see him, a man of compassion, but much more than that, you see dignity personified. He exudes respect. He respects you, of course, but when you see him, you see, yes, this is somebody that you should respect because of what he stood for. He never hesitated in letting you know what he stood for. He stood for principles, but was ready to listen to suggestions and to compromise where it was necessary to do so, even if he felt he was right. And there were several occasions that occurred that we had with him. He interacted with Nigeria on several planes. First, as president of the ANC, leader of the ANC, coming to Nigeria before the 94 elections, and interacting with our then President Ibrahim Babangida. And each time he came back to Southern Africa, he would tell us, say, thank my president for me. That was the way he referred to IBB. Thank my president for me. Last time I was there, he gave ANC X millions of dollars. Thank him very much. He was always appreciative of whatever was done for the liberation movement.
Now, and talking about appreciation, the pictures we have here, live features pictures from South Africa, and that's around his house. And those are people showing their appreciation of the kind of life he lived, how he impacted their lives. You see children, both young and old, they're all there to
commemorate
this, to celebrate this man, as they say. Our reporter told us earlier that it's more of a celebration than mourning in South Africa. Did you expect that would be the case?
Yes, I expect that will be the case. In case, let me make a point, which is that Mandela was not the first elected black president of South Africa. No. He was the first democratically elected president of South Africa. He was someone who refused to accept that you are black and you are white, therefore something will follow in between. But that it was not a racist system that he was fighting for, but one that would enthrone democracy. So ANC was fighting for democracy in Africa. The rest of African countries were fighting against the apartheid system because it was anti-black.
Okay.
It said the black man was a criminal from birth. That was apartheid. And so the United Nations, the rest of the world, described apartheid as a crime against humanity. And we in Nigeria, the Obong of Calabar, said it was a sin against God, because God created both black and white. And if a group of people should then say blacks are criminals because of their skin color, then that group of people offending God. That's why apartheid was so described. So he did not see himself as the first elected black president. He's the first elected, democratically elected, because all previous elections were fake as far as he was concerned.
Okay, just before we go, one last question. Now, he's been described as a great leader. Do you think he's irreplaceable?
He is.
Is he irreplaceable? Can we get a replacement for Mandela?
He left office after just one term, which meant that he himself was saying that no human being should consider himself as irreplaceable. And that is what you tell people. Take a glass, fill it with water, put your finger in it, take it out. Whatever gap you see is what will remain. There's no gap. He left quietly and ensured that his successor was peacefully and transparently installed, because he, as you quoted him earlier as saying, he knew that at the end of the day, each human being, as long as you are created, will live, you will depart, and so you will be replaced. But in terms of whether we can have another Mandela, I would say no, because he was unique. He was a unique person in terms of the times that he lived, and also in terms of what he stood for within his country and the way the world perceived him. Some of the sacrifices he was prepared to undertake on behalf of his people. He was unique.
Do you think African leaders, especially leaders generally, but especially in Africa, do you think what can they draw from the life of Mandela?
What they can draw from the life of Mandela, I think they would say they wish him well, but that he lived at a time when some of the qualities that they consider important were not so highly held. However, what they will see in him is somebody worthy of emulation, but that they do not want to emulate. I give you one example. President Yoweri Museveni came to office in 1986 through struggle, and he visited Brussels, Belgium, and addressed the Committee of Ambassadors, African, Pacific, Caribbean and Pacific ambassadors, and said to them, the problem with Africa is the problem of sit-tight presidents. There is nothing any African leader cannot do within 4 years. There's no reason to stay 4 years. That was 1986. The man is still in power now. This is 2013. And so even though he knew what was the right thing to do, when it comes to actually doing it, it's difficult.
That sounds like hypocrisy on the part of African leaders now.
Well, originally he was not a hypocrite. He meant it.
Okay.
But when he got there, he began to see things that he thought he could not do within that. You see, one of his former predecessors, Milton Obote, who, when he was introducing the new socialist system, said it will be implemented through a phased system. It will take about 30 years to implement it. So if you're going to take 30 years to introduce and implement socialism fully, you want to continue for 30 years to be head of state? Of course, Amin removed him in 1970. And so on that basis, that particular situation came to an end. But African leaders generally, because more than 90%, do not believe in the type of things that Mandela stood for. They want to be there. Indeed, not too long ago, Mugabe believed that Mandela made mistakes that he was too soft. That South Africa required somebody who was much tougher in terms of how you knock heads and things like that. But of course, as he himself can see, the whole world eulogizes Mandela. They don't eulogize Mugabe in terms of his own position.
Okay, let's look at the younger generation. And seeing that Mandela went through a trying period, I mean, there was no leader to show an example, so to speak. Now, but yet he and his friends forged a vision for themselves and they followed it through. What can the younger generation in Africa today draw from that kind of life? With the kind of circumstances they find themselves in, they might tell you there's no example, our leaders are not doing good. What should the younger generation pull from this?
Well, the younger generation, when they look at the situation, they will find that it is an entirely different situation in African countries now. Not like what happened in South Africa. There is nowhere that you have that occurring. However, in terms of the gap, the gulf between the rich and the poor, the classes, the cleavages which exist in African countries, a lot can be done, except that the younger generation are not being allowed to do so. They themselves are not putting themselves in positions where they can make a difference in terms of where, for example, their countries are going. Take Nigeria. The politicking that takes place, apart from governance, you know the difference between politicking and governance. Once you are busy politicking, you are wasting your time, the time of the people. Of course, not for them, but in terms of getting things done for the masses.
If I may just come in. Professor Ogunsanwo, you've listened to Bishop Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and one of the questions he asked is, what will happen now that our father is dead? What does the future hold? Should there be any fears?
Well, he himself answered that because he did say that fears were expressed that as soon as he died, there will be polymorphous violence and racism would come back in a violent way. And so to that extent, South Africa might face disintegration. And he said that really is a fear that is unjustified because it does not pay respect to the legacy that Mandela had left behind and some of the things he had tried to do to lay the foundation for a future stability and reconciliation. The future for South Africa is, as at now, not in that direction. That does not mean that many years ahead there will be no conflict. There is no country that would not have conflict, but it's how you manage the conflict, how you ensure that the things that are happening are not allowed to go beyond what you can handle.
Okay,
that will test the statesmanship of the new leaders of South Africa.
Okay, thank you, Professor Alaba Ogunsanwo. Thank you for coming on the
Thank you very much.